Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Sliz. I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon along with Jason McHugh. Before we get into the demo, I thought I would just provide a brief introduction to our identity governance solution. And we'll start with some of the things that we've heard from customers in terms of their pain points and things that have led them to consider an identity governance solution. So from clinicians, especially department heads, we hear complaints that new users, their doctors or residents or nurses, are not getting access to everything they need to access for their jobs from day one. So it can take anywhere from a few days to a couple weeks to get complete and accurate access for their jobs. So that's frustrating for them. From an IT director or help desk perspective, they get notifications of new hires maybe via email, but they don't necessarily get all the information they need on the level of access and exactly how to set that person up, what to grant them in the system. So that leads to a lot of unnecessary back and forth to determine what access privileges to grant. Many times the request may be as simple as make Nurse John look like Nurse Jane, but that's not really desirable in the sense that Nurse John may end up with additional access that he doesn't really need as a new employee. Finally, from a security perspective, a CISO position or our CIOs, they want to know that everyone's access is compliant with their role and organizational policies. But there may not be a place where all the access being granted to different users is captured for reporting or auditing purposes. In the case of an audit, a team may only be able to create a report for AD and the main EHR after multiple days of work, which isn't really satisfying for anyone. So into this type of scenario, we introduce Imprivata's identity governance solution. And here's how we can help. So we offer a healthcare-focused identity governance and administration solution that enables security and compliance managers to support corporate governance, risk management, and compliance, or GRC, initiatives. It all starts with onboarding new users with precise role-based access controls. And once the solution knows which systems and entitlements are to be assigned to users based on their job location, department, and job codes, the system or the solution can automatically provision the necessary accounts with the right permissions for the job. Kind of moving around the right side of the circle there, the security team and department managers can perform regular access entitlement reviews and certifications and actually initiate changes right from the identity governance reports. Users can leverage the self-service features of Imprivata Identity Governance to request access to additional applications that were not part of their original role definition, and those requests can be routed to their managers for approval, instead of having to engage IT or the help desk with tickets and work on their part. Rounding out the circle there, our role-based risk dashboard and advanced analytics allow for faster risk analysis and remediation. Finally, when users leave an organization, they're taken out of all their applications. This is really important. Think of someone who's been working in an organization for 10 or 15 years, and that person's accumulated a lot of access entitlements during job changes or promotions. When they leave, the only thing that may be known about them is the most recent access privileges. Anything older may not be known or documented, so there's the possibility of orphaned accounts or essentially access that person has that is forgotten to be turned off. This entire solution is built on our on Imprivata's governance, compliance, and risk management platform. So that's really all I'm going to do as far as an introduction or an overview to Imprivata Identity Governance. And now we are going to get into the demo. So we'll turn the screen over to Jason. And the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to help Jason walk through this demo a little bit. So Jason, to get started, can you walk us through how a new identity request from an HR system, such as PeopleSoft, can be initiated and processed?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Jason McHugh. And yeah, if you can see my screen, I've got a one-sign enabled desktop pulled up where I'll just walk through a few different personas and kind of show you a couple of the workflows that our identity governance solution handles. So as Rebecca said, our solution is designed to take feeds from source systems such as your HR system, your physician credentialing system. We can do bulk imports from, say, a student spreadsheet. However you're tracking your identities from the source of truth, we'll ingest those different feeds, parse the information, and automate a workflow around it. So for instance, Toby here, he's my HR employee. He's going to tap into this workstation, and he's going to onboard a new employee coming to work at the hospital. So I'm just going to open up my little dummy HR portal. This could be your PeopleSoft system, Workday, UltiPro, your Meditech HR system, whatever you're leveraging to create and manage your users today, and that's all I'm doing here. So Rebecca, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to create you as a new employee in my hospital. I'm going to give you an employee ID. And then I'm going to start assigning you to the facility you'll be working at, which is my Vicksburg office. You're going to be put into my ER department, and I'm going to set you up as a physician. And for the sake of time, I won't fill all of the demographic details. I'll go ahead and submit this request. So from an HR employee perspective, Toby did his job. He created Rebecca in the HR system, set her up with the proper job codes, employment types, facility codes, job codes, department codes, everything that Rebecca would need so that she gets a paycheck come Friday. What we're doing behind the scenes is taking that information, recognizing new users coming on board, users that might be changing departments or job codes or facilities. We're going to look for terminations. We'll look for rehires. Once we recognize what's happening to that identity, now we're going to look at the details of that information, such as your department, job code, facility codes, whatever we can do to determine that user's role. And once we know their role, we're going to automate processes around it. So in my environment, Rebecca, being a new employee, being hired in my Vicksburg office as an ER doc, gets set up with a certain set of entitlements. So in my environment, she's been created in Active Directory. She's been put in the proper OU. She's been given all the security and distribution groups she needs to do her job as an ER doctor. She's also been set up with her home login script, her home network shares, all the details from an Active Directory perspective she needs. Her role says she gets email. We've automatically created her email account. In my case, it's an on-prem exchange. We work with Office 365. We work with Lotus, any other of the email applications out there. Based upon Rebecca's role, she's also been granted access in certain downstream clinical and business applications. So in my environment, I'm running this Cosmos EMR application. Because this request came from my HR system, my source of truth, I've automatically provisioned Rebecca within Cosmos. I've got a couple of other applications here, G, Centricity, and Cases, which I'll touch on in a second. But from an HR perspective, Toby did his job. He created Rebecca. He logs out of the desktop. So now Rebecca comes to work day one. Her manager or whoever is responsible hands her credentials. She comes up to the computer, signs in with her username and password, and a couple of things you'll notice. One, she got logged in, which means she's got valid AD credentials. And two, she's getting prompted to enroll authentication methods. And this is coming up because her role says she gets single sign-on access. If you're running Imprivata OneSign today, we can integrate with OneSign to where as soon as you're created and your identity has been set up within the organization, if your identity says you get single sign-on, we'll create you in OneSign automatically. Not only that, your applications have been SSO enabled, and you as an end user don't ever have to learn or teach the application their credentials. So if I launch Cosmos here, you'll see Rebecca's logged in without ever having to type in her name and password, signed in with all the attributes and entitlements and permissions she needs to do her job as an ER doc. Likewise, as I mentioned, her role says she gets email. I launch an Outlook Web Access. Not only is she in, but it's been single sign-on enabled. So one click, she's in and ready to go. Now with the identity governance solution, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
No, go ahead, go ahead. It's amazing, go ahead.
Yeah. Beyond the fact that Rebecca has quick access to her applications, day zero access with all the entitlements she needs to do her job, she also has some self-service functionality. So if I launch into the Imprivata Identity Governance portal, you notice it is a web-based UI. All of your users have access to this, but what they can do when they log in is really going to be dependent upon their role. So Rebecca, as your typical end user, she'll be able to see how she's created or managed from an identity perspective, how the organization sees her. She can see what application she currently has access to. So there's Exchange is active, that Cosmos application is active and ready to go. But there's other applications here that are pending approval. So if you require an approval process anywhere along the way within your workflows, we can implement that with our solution where the proper approver will get notified, letting them know that there's an outstanding request to, in this case, create Rebecca within either GE Centricity or that cases app. If, as an end user, you want to give your identities the ability to request applications, they can come in here, click Request Application Account, be presented a list of applications that you as an organization would allow them to self-request, and they can pick and choose which applications they want. If they forget application passwords, if you don't have one sign rolled out across the organization and they do forget passwords, they can click Change Account of Password, pick which application that they want that password reset in, and it would go through the steps to reset that password appropriately. Likewise, you can give them the ability to modify their profile or change their Active Directory password all through the self-service portal.
That's great, Jason. Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
go ahead. I didn't know.
Stepping on your toes here, Rebecca. I'm used to just talking to myself
all right.
here.
Well, I was just going to say you're going through a lot of things, and I'm impressed with how much you're showing. I just wanted to remind people that if you're, as Jason's going through the demo, if questions come up in your mind, feel free to submit them via the Q&A panel on your screen. So go ahead, Jason, into the next segment here.
Sure. So as I was saying, Rebecca is an end user. She's logged in. She's gotten day zero access. She's in the self-service portal, reviewing the information and noticing that she's still waiting on access for Centricity in cases. She can log in here and see exactly what she's waiting on, an approval by Miranda Bailey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out as Rebecca here, and I'm going to log in as Miranda. So I've got her badge. I tap in. Miranda Bailey in my environment, she's my training manager. So Rebecca doesn't get access to Centricity until she's gone through training and that training manager has signed off on it. And your environments, maybe you've got an application owner that has to approve the access, plus a training manager, plus maybe somebody else. We can have a multi-level approval process. But in the approval process, by default, we can send email notifications. So if I launch into Miranda's email, you'll see there's 2 new emails here letting her know that there's an outstanding request to approve Rebecca within Centricity, as well as that cases application. So what that approver can do is just simply click the link in the email. It's going to once again open up to the Identity Governance UI and take that approver directly to that request, where he or she can review exactly how that user is going to be built within that given application. So in this case, I chose Centricity. So all these details and all these elements are exactly how Rebecca is going to be built within my GE Centricity EMR application. All the fields that are going to be populated, now a lot of this is blank because I left the HR trigger blank. But as I scroll through, that approver can review the details, add some notes if necessary, and then kick off of the process, whether it be to approve that request, reject that request, or cancel it out. What happens when I click these buttons is truly going to be dependent upon your organization. If I hit approve, it might go to a second level approver. If I hit reject, it might go to a specialist to review to see if Rebecca should truly be denied access to Centricity. If I hit cancel and this request goes idle for 3-4 days, we can automatically forward it to another user or group of users to review this request so that it never does go stagnant. Now, in my demo environment, when I hit approve, this is when Rebecca gets access to Centricity. So the way we provide access to applications truly is application specific. You saw earlier Rebecca got access to Active Directory and Exchange. That's because we're using native Microsoft APIs to provide that integration. Certain EMRs like Centricity or like Cerner and Epic have APIs, and we heavily leverage those APIs because of our healthcare expertise to create and manage users within those apps. But other applications, your Meditechs, your Centricities, your PACS, your cardiology systems, and all your business apps that don't have native APIs, that don't allow direct database access, that are not LDAP enabled. How do you interface with those? Well, with the Imprivata solution, we leverage what we call our bridges. Similar to how Imprivata's APG solution works from a single sign-on perspective, we will actually navigate through the fields and screens of those admin consoles of those applications to build and manage users appropriately. These bridges will run behind the scenes and users will never see or interact with them. But if you were watching, you'd see them logging in as an admin user and going through the steps to create and manage users within those applications appropriately. Now I'll show you what one of those bridges looks like on my screen here, but I do want to stress this isn't something your end users would ever see in a real world environment. But I'm going to hit approve here. I'm going to minimize these IE windows. And in a couple of seconds, and here it goes, Centricity is going to launch, log in as that admin account, and go through the steps to not just create Rebecca, but to populate all the fields, choose all the drop-downs, check all the boxes, do everything required to give Rebecca exactly what she needs to do her job within GE Centricity. And when done, that bridge simply closes out. Now that bridge will handle the creation of users. It will handle the modifications as users as they change roles within your organization. It'll disable or delete users when they leave the organization. It handles the password reset functionality, all within a single bridge. And we give you the tooling and the training to build these bridges on your own. You don't have to come to Imprivata, although you can, to build those integrations to all your various applications.
Great, Jason. I have a question I wanted to ask, which is what kind of reporting dashboard is available for auditing and monitoring in identity governance?
Sure. So as you saw, we're managing all the identities within the organization, plus handling the automation and creation of all those different downstream clinical business apps. Well, a side benefit of that is that we can track and audit every step along the way, and because we have all that information, there's a lot we can do with it. So let me log out as Miranda, and I'm going to log in as Chuck. He's more of an IT/compliance security officer. And when Chuck logs into the desktop, he's going to once again launch into that same identity governance portal, but this time as a user with elevated rights, he's going to see a different type of screen and information. He'll still have all the same self-service functionality that your standard end users have, but by default, when Chuck or any other admin logs in, he's going to see a scorecard of information that's relevant to him based upon his role, as well as a set of widgets below that gives him a visual representation of what's going on within the organization. And the nice thing about this is that everything you see on the screen is actionable. I can click on this scorecard of 17 unauthorized accounts and get a report of those 17 users. I could click on this mismatch entitlements report and get a list of all the users with mismatch entitlements. If I wanted to drill down, say just wanted to look at my Centricity orphan accounts, I could click this bar and this widget, be taken to the specific report that I clicked on, in this case orphan accounts within Centricity, and now I have a couple of options. I can take action on this, whereas I can highlight Mary Beth here, go to Actions, choose Delete, or it might say Disable. And when I click this, what would happen is that Centricity bridge would launch, log in as that admin account, look up Mary Beth, and go through the steps to delete or disable her appropriately within that application. And what that does is within a couple of clicks now, I've got one less security or compliance risk within my organization. If I'm not the right person to review this report, I can assign a task to somebody else. Maybe Mark Smith is my Centricity guy. I can send it to him. I can send it to groups of users, add some notes, and when I hit assign, what will happen is Mark will get an email notification letting him know that there's a new compliance task to review. He'd click the link, be taken to this report, and now he can take action on it as needed. Now that was manually sending a compliance report or task or looking it up. We do have the ability to auto-generate compliance tasks or attestation reports, send them to managers or application owners or whoever needs to see the given report. So if I go into the compliance task section, you'll see I've got quite a few different tasks. Some I've worked on, some I've accepted, rejected, some I've reassigned. But one I want to pull up is maybe my direct audit report. Here's a report of me as a manager, all my employees, what applications my employees have access to, and with a double click, I can see what entitlements that user has within that given application. So now what I can do is start reviewing, like, yep, Bill should have access to that, that's good, yep, that's good. And if I find a problem, say, you know what, Bill's access to Epic isn't right. I can click Request Change, and I have different options. These are once again customizable to your organization of saying, this isn't my direct report, this user shouldn't have this access, this user should have different access. Whatever I choose, I add the relevant details and hit save. It's going to send the notification to the proper individual to take action. And once again, it's going to be one less compliance or security risk within my organization as I review this information and make the changes as needed. When done, after everything's checked, I digitally sign this report, save it off, and I have that audit trail that lets me know this report was generated at this time, it was sent to Chuck for review, he completed it at this point in time, and every comment and every note along the way is tracked and audited.
That's very helpful, Jason, to see how users are both onboarded and then changes are managed for that user while they're in the system. Can you tell us a little bit about how we can get a user out of the systems when they leave, and especially how quickly we can do that?
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to try to take as much information we can from a source of truth to automate as many of the processes as possible. So your HR system, your credentialing system, wherever we're getting that information fed, will handle the creation, the modification, and the termination of users as needed. But there's always going to be those situations where you need to manipulate a user identity on the fly. And that's where you can come into this dashboard here, come over to the user management section, and this is where you would have the ability to create, to manipulate, to disable users as needed. So by default, if I come up here, I can click create, build a new identity from scratch if they're not coming from a source of truth. Or if I wanted to look up a user, there's Rebecca. You see she's an active user in my environment. When I highlight her, now I have all sorts of actions I can take. I can archive her. I can make modifications from an identity perspective on her. I can adjust her permissions. I can suspend her. From an application standpoint, this is where I have the ability to give her additional application access, make modifications to her applications as needed. But as Rebecca's question states, Rebecca's being walked out the hospital, and we need to take her out of the system right away. This is where we can go. I can choose archive, and when I choose that, it'll tell me exactly what Rebecca has access to. So I've got Microsoft Exchange, I've got the GEMR, and I've got Cosmos here. It's also letting me know that I've got some pending requests. There's still that outstanding request to approve her within cases. That will be deleted if I choose OK here. But if I hit OK, what will happen is we'll go into Active Directory. We'll either disable her or move her to a disabled OU, delete her if your organization deletes AD identities. We'll remove her email, and then we'll start touching all of those downstream clinical and business applications, making sure that Rebecca is not only locked out of the front door, but taken out of every single application or disabled in every single application that she had access to, and in a streamlined, automated manner. And once again, if I did hit OK here, we'd have that audit trail. She'd show as disabled, and when we opened up her record and we did want to see her audit history, we would see a whole list of creations, deletions, disablements, and as you see, if I highlight any of these, all the relevant details of that action that took place.
Got it, Jason. Thank you. So we're going to move into a couple questions that have come in from participants in the webinar, and others who may have joined more recently, do feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A panel. Here's one to get us started, Jason. So if I'm managing right now, managing information via spreadsheets, which is probably typical in some organizations. So the question is, can information from an Excel spreadsheet be pulled in to populate ID numbers? You know, how basically tell us a little bit about, you know, if you're tracking in Excel now and there's information there, how could that be pulled in?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we can take inputs from different source systems, and usually in a healthcare environment, you've got your actual employees coming from HR, your non-employee credentialed positions might be managed in the credentialing system, and a lot of the times, more often than not, students, residents, things of that nature are tracked and managed in an Excel spreadsheet. So we can take and adjust a spreadsheet or a CSV file or comma delimited file and parse through those details and populate and manage user identities in that way. So absolutely, you would just drop that spreadsheet into a defined network folder. We would ingest it. We would know what all the different fields are in that spreadsheet were because they'd be defined within our solution, and we automate workflows based upon the input we receive.
Great. Another question that came in, so can you disable the AD but leave other access available so that billing processes can complete?
Yes. So we get that a lot. Say Epic is a good example where somebody needs to complete the billing, the process, but that physician's no longer around. So what we would do is based upon the role that that user's defined in or that identity's defined, we can absolutely disable their Active Directory account, disable certain applications while leaving others active for a period of 30 or 60 days or whatever makes sense, and then go back and do the additional workflows, whether it be to completely disable them. This is all just configuration and definitions within the role-based access of our solution to determine what happens when that user leaves the organization, whether we just disable certain applications, whether we disable everything, and then 180 days later maybe do some deletions. Even if we delete users out, we still have the audit trail and the history within our solution, even if they do no longer exist in Active Directory. But at a high level, yes, we absolutely can disable the AD, but still leave the application access enabled for a certain period of time.
Okay. Another question. So if an organization uses HR for employees but a ticketing system for non-employees, does this solution work with ticketing systems as well?
We do. And we can work with ticketing systems in a couple of different ways. We can take that ticketing system as a source of truth. So if you manage certain identities through the ticketing system, we would get a feed and automate the workflow processes similar to what I just showed you. Or in a lot of our organizations, what they'll do is we'll get the feed from your source of truth, we'll automate the processes for the applications that we're managing, and then we could kick off a ticket through your ticketing system to handle any other applications that might not be managed through our solution day one. So with the Imprivata Identity Governance, whether you have automation or not, we can still manage your entire application list. So in my example, Rebecca was given AD, Exchange, Cosmos, and GE Centricity. But her role might say she also gets PACS and, we'll say a cardiology system. If I'm managing them through identity governance, I know she should have access. But if I don't have automation, I can generate a ticket that says create Rebecca within PACS and within cardiology with these exact entitlements. Your help desk or your application owner would go in, manually create Rebecca within those apps, and then come in our solution and just click the button that says created. And what that does is it still gives us the complete audit trail of knowing exactly what Rebecca has access to, even if we don't have automation day one. And then you can provide automation maybe in a phase 2 or phase 3 when you pull up our wizard tool, you do the point and click creation of the bridge, and you integrate it into your environment. So yeah, there's a lot of different workflows we can do with the ticketing system that's currently in place at your organization.
Okay. What if, here's another situation. So our organization doesn't have roles defined. How could we use something like identity governance without predefined roles?
So when we're doing an implementation, we've gone through all the various extremes from one to the other, where we've got some organizations that have well-defined roles and others that don't have any whatsoever. We do provide a UI, and if you look at my screen, we've got this whole role management functionality, where if I pull up that ER physician role I used earlier, you can see I just define the criteria that's associated to that role, what applications that role gets, and what entitlements that user gets within that application. So we can get as granular as I've got here, or you can go very high level, and if you don't have roles defined and you find it very complicated to build the roles, we'll create some high level, we'll call them skeleton roles, where you're given base access to the AD exchange or in your downstream EMR, and then sending the notifications out to the proper application owners to go and build that user out the rest of the way appropriately. So we can go that route. But with our healthcare expertise and our implementation engineers that are only working in healthcare organizations and have been doing this for a decade or more, we can guide you through the role building process, give you our best practices, and really allow you to utilize this UI to build out your roles and give users the exact entitlements they need, whether you've got predefined roles in place when we start the implementation or not.
Okay. Question about whether an organization needs to have one sign in order to utilize Imprivata Identity Governance. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, so the two solutions together will provide a wealth of data and functionality that independently they don't provide on their own. But they are independent platforms. They can run separate from each other. You do not need one sign to leverage identity governance. Likewise, obviously, you don't need identity governance to leverage one sign. But with the two together, to understand the identity data of the individual, plus the access data, how they're accessing the applications, where they're accessing, and the ability to feed all that data into this identity governance solution gives you that holistic view of what's going on in your organization. So no, they're not needed. You don't need one sign to run identity governance, but you do get the benefits of having both of the solutions together due to the integration that we provide between the two solutions.
Okay. Speaking of sort of visibility, is there a report that shows which application access is, or what application access is assigned to each user, not just at the manager level?
So yeah, within this dashboard here, as I mentioned, it is role-based. Different users are going to see different information, but one of the options is this whole reporting infrastructure. And similar to the dashboard, the reports that you see and view and have access to and what you can do within the report is role-based. Different users will see different things. So I've got different reports such as user transactions, application usage reports, what users have been newly created, users with mismatch entitlements. So I absolutely can see everything that's going on with every identity as far as how they're built, their user entitlements, entitlements by facility, all those details. And then to your specific question, what applications are assigned to each user, that's where I could either go through the report here and drill down. If I go into my application entitlements, I could do a search parameters, look for a specific user. Say if I just pull up Jay, since he's my top one, you can see exchange, centricity cases, and just like I saw earlier, if I click into these, you can see exactly what entitlements that user has. So all of this information is contained within the report infrastructure, and it's all tied back to all the auditing data that we capture and have insight into.
Okay. One more question, and unless anyone else who's on a participant would like to put one in the Q&A box, but here's one more. So how do you handle job changes? A person suggests that many times they don't even know until a user has already started in a new department of a job change. So what happens with job changes?
Right, so what we can do is ideally we'd like to once again get that information from a source of truth. So that's an employee and they're managed through Lawson or PeopleSoft or Workday, we're going to recognize that that facility code or that job code or that department code has changed. And if that change gets defined to a new role within our identity governance solution, we're going to automate that process, recognize that new user's role, strip those previous entitlements as part of their previous role, give them the new entitlements they need as part of their new role. So essentially giving them the exact access they need at that given point in time. Now, if they switched and HR's, once again, sluggish potentially of getting to that user request and updating them, that's where you could go into the user management, pull up that user, and I can go into actions and I can make a modification to her identity, where at this point you could see I can change her facility or I'd have the ability to change her department, job code, or all those details directly from the screen. All the information here is going to be customized to your organization. So very easy to do, and if I did change it here, and then maybe a day later we do get that feed from HR, all it's going to do is sync up to the changes already made and verify that everything is correct for Rebecca's new role.
Okay. We have another question that came in, which is, does Imprivata assist organizations to provide custom audit reports for either internal or external auditors like PwC or CMS?
Yeah, we have worked with other organizations that have gone through an audit and needed certain information. Ideally, all the information we have is all captured in our back-end databases. All the reports that we have that you get out of the box, plus through the content management here, you can create and build your own reports with your own columns of data and your own information that's required for these internal or external auditors. So we will absolutely provide you the ability to run any report you need, and you can come and call Imprivata support, and we can work with you if there's specific data that you're looking for. We can guide you to where to find it within the solution.
Great. Thanks, Jason. You covered a lot today, and we answered a lot of questions. I think that those are all the questions that we have from our participants. So I just wanted to invite you, Jason, if you had any comments that you wanted to make before we turn it back over to Miriam to close out.
No, I do appreciate everybody's time. Obviously, I did very high level on a lot of the functionality of the solution, all these different options here. So reach out to the appropriate individuals at Imprivata and they'll engage the right resources, and I'm happy to go far deeper with your organization into what the solution can do for you.
Great. Great. Thanks so much, Jason, and thank you, Rebecca. I am going to close things out, but just before we go, for anyone who does have additional questions about what you've seen or heard here today, I actually just put my own information, again, my name is Miriam Lizardo, in the chat box that you'll see there with my email address, which is MLAZ as in zebra, ARTO @imprivata.com. Definitely reach out to me directly if you have an